From the city of St. Petersburg, Major Donald Queer of the St. Petersburg Police Department, and Darrell Stevens, the Chief of Police of the city of St. Petersburg.
Thank you, Governor. I've been thinking all day that you've saved the best for last, that we knew that you'd be happy to see us.
Modesty is a very becoming quality.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about St. Petersburg's community problem-solving policing model. With me is Major Don Quire, who's a key member of our executive team and largely responsible for the success that we've enjoyed over the last several years. Crime, violence, and fear have been national priority problems for quite some time. In January of this year, an annual national poll indicated that 37% of Americans ranked crime as the #1 problem over health care, unemployment, the economy, and poverty. To put this in perspective, prior to 1994, the highest that crime had ever been in this poll was in 1969, when 17% of the people listed it as our most pressing problem. All of the other years, it was around 6 or 7%. This concern has caused citizens to look to government and the police for solutions to these persistent problems. For the most part, the responses at every level of government have been continued reliance on deterrence and punishment through beefing up various parts of the criminal justice system. The current debate on the crime bill in Washington is a good example of government's largely reactive response. Community policing has emerged as a visible and popular approach to dealing with these problems. A recent national survey of communities serving populations of greater than 50,000 indicated that 42% have community policing programs. In many cases, these programs involve activities like foot or bicycle patrols, mini stations, and officers assigned to public housing. The key difference between St. Petersburg and most of these other cities is that while we're engaged in some of these activities, we are on a course that will make working in a partnership with the community to solve problems the work of every employee, not just a special unit or group that represents a small portion of our resources. What makes us different is that we make extensive use of technology to manage resources, identify problems, maintain contact with the community, monitor progress, and measure results. We are changing the way that we think about our work, the way we relate to the community we serve, and our ultimate aim is to enhance the effectiveness of our contribution towards the creation of a safer environment for all citizens. We are trying to create a safer environment by placing as much or more emphasis on solutions that prevent crime rather than totally relying on the arrest, prosecution, and incarceration process. We're trying to create a safer environment by working with the community to better understand these problems in their neighborhoods and the importance of their commitment and involvement in solution implementation. We have evidence that suggests we're making progress. The number of officers working on specific crime, violence, and fear problems continues to grow in our city. Officers and community members' focus on repeat call locations has also led to reductions in the number of times that we return to the same location for the same problem. In 1993, police officers responded to over 150 calls at 506 Grove Street in our city for problems related to drugs. In 1994, we responded to none. 2 blocks away at 324 Grove Street, we responded to over 100 calls for police service. In 1994, we've responded to none. Surveys of citizens who have had contact with police officers indicate improvement from 1991 to 93 in their opinion of officers' helpfulness, conduct, fairness, judgment, and problem solving. Reported Part 1 crimes have declined by almost 15% from 1991 to 1993, and so far in 1994 we've experienced another 6% decline. What we're doing in St. Petersburg is of critical importance to policing in America. It has been done within existing personnel resources of our department. It's making a difference inside our organization and in our community, and it can be replicated in other cities. It's important to understand, however, that what we are doing is a work in progress. We are introducing significant change to our police department and to our community, and to no one's surprise, we're encountering the resistance that accompanies any major change. We expect to see a continual evolution of this concept as we learn more about working with our community to solve problems in a true partnership with them. Thank you, and we're both prepared to answer questions that you may have.
Thank you. Starting with Max Sherman.
The first couple of years of this program were described as turbulent at one point. What's changed things?
You're being very kind. We did have a very turbulent time. We were initiating organizational change in our city. We had our new chief of police. We just began this operational thing that we call community problem-solving policing, and our chief got fired. What happened during the course of that showed and illustrated to me that our philosophical approach to policing was the right direction, a very powerful influence internally and externally, because through all the controversy that we had, all the volatile times, the bonding between our citizens and our police department grew. And while we were dealing with some problems in our department, in our city, in a lot of ways it brought us closer together. We got stronger as a community, as a department. We learned our lessons, applied them well.
Can I just,
Follow
Mr.
up,
Chairman,
yes.
but the acceptance of the program after going through that, could you just expand on that a little bit? Why all of a sudden it's been endorsed and supported, and why is that working?
I think what happened was, for the first time for a police officer's career, they were reborn. We took officers and allowed them to take a geographic area where they had ownership and bond with the community in ways they never had an opportunity to do before. And they started engaging each other, working on problems. That interaction between the citizen and the officer dealing with common unity problems brought the community together, and as an end result, they could see that they could resolve things together. And I think what that did was show and illustrate that police, the community, have a responsibility to each other to work together to resolve community issues, and it can work. And what we saw was the power of it working, and that's why it really was a very positive effect.
If I may add to that, we just received a survey of the city, throughout the city, just on Wednesday, and that survey indicated us, which was a little bit of a surprise to us, that 24% of the citizens that responded to that survey indicated that they had had an experience at working with an officer in the police department to solve a problem in their neighborhood.
How would you respond to the cynic that would say, this is a great idea, working with the public in positive, non-threatening ways enhances the image of the police, but yet the calls for service, the demand load for most police departments, 95% comes in through the communication center. Is there any variation in that in St. Petersburg, or do you still get there the great majority of the police work coming in through the telephone lines?
First of all, you got to address what we call an important attitude. We call it bureaucratic and policing insanity. And that's doing the same thing, expecting different results. So one of the things that we did to answer your question was take a look at repeated calls for service. Now, if we could take those repeated calls for service, solve them long term, that will give us more time and opportunity and actually equate to additional officers and reduce calls for service. Our perspective is to take those kind of issues and solve them long term, get the root cause of the problem, not a Band-Aid effect, but really have an impact in the community. If you reduce those calls for service, it allows our officers, our supervisors, and our citizens working together themselves to be more creative and innovative.
Over the last decade or so, about the last 78 to 1990, we increased in this country the incarceration rate by 168%. America now arrests more of its citizens than any nation on earth, including the Soviet Union and South Africa. There are those that would say that this particular style of police does not encourage arrests. It fundamentally involves order maintenance and interacting with the public. It impacts on fear, but not on crime. You impact only on the statistics because the police are not really arresting as many people as they were before, given this particular mode of policing.
Here's a fundamental way we're changing our perspective in the way we police. If you take a look at what constitutes a quality of life issue or a crime, there are three elements. You've got to have a victim, you have to have a defender, and you have to have the environment. The environment includes the social and psychological and physical context. policing perspective have been focused primarily on the offender. What we're teaching in a community policing problem-solving philosophy is to understand the relationships between all three of those elements of the triangle and apply problem-solving solutions to address all those equitably. If we do that, then it means that our course and focus is going to shift away from just incarceration and arresting, but seeing what the interrelationships between those other elements, being the offender and the environment, are, and the police have an important role because we're there 24 hours a day, and we're beginning to understand that we can have an impact on those other two legs of the triangle we haven't before.
Prior to, oh, I'm
Another
sorry.
aspect of that is that not only have we had declines in the statistics, that survey that I mentioned indicated that people in the neighborhoods feel safer in their neighborhoods. That's been a major change. And they've also, in looking at assault, robbery, burglary, theft, auto theft, they perceive those to be less of a problem today than they did 3 years ago.